into a ditch. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely catch 22, and at this point, we're not going to be able to stop it. So I guess just like I always say, right, you got to manage it.
Sure, sure. So you have now a family of your own.
Yes,
I've met your son. I don't. Do you have daughters?
yes, I have two.
I don't think I've ever met them, or maybe I have, but I know that Rafa three,
Four. He's
four.
four.
Okay, so he's four. He went to school in South Carolina, right?
Yes, he did.
And he's back now living in California. What does the future hold for him as a kid who was born to a dual citizen? Who, I mean, do you see him laying his roots down in Baja, or is he gonna straddle the border, as I've said about you, for his life? What's in store for your kid? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think you know, I've always been, let's say, open to my kids choosing what they want to do as long as they choose and commit to doing something.
Yeah.
And he's done well. He's gone to Clemson, ventured out to the East Coast, and found out what living on the other side of the American continent is like. Met some great people, got a great education at a great university that we're quite proud of, and it set him up with an engineering degree, and he came back to USC to do a master's in aerospace engineering. And I would say that the future for him absolutely includes Baja. He's an accomplished off-road racer, so he has the passion for the. I would almost call it, next to soccer, the national sport, right?
For Baja, for sure.
Yeah, so at least for Baja, right? And you can argue that sometimes we think we can be our own country, but in any case, yeah, I mean he's becoming an accomplished mechanic now of off-road trucks, developing and designing some of his own parts, and he's going to have engineering definitely in his business, but that lends itself to other things and providing support to some of our businesses that we have in Mexico. Okay, outside of Pete's camp, and I think at the end of the day, for me now, I mean, he's the guy that carries the torch for the family, into the next generation. So it has to include both sides of the border, if you will.
I'm going to go back to something where you actually stumbled for a second, as I do sometimes, and that was in I think you said you were starting to say America and then North America.
Yeah.
Got me thinking. I know that. Again, listeners by now that have been listening understand that I did live in Baja for about a decade, and so I became and got my citizenship. So yeah. We share that in common. But I know that there is Mexico is part of America, and we forget that sometimes. We as American citizens call our country America, but the reality of it is it's the United States of America. And when you say America to an educated or patriotic Mexican, they say, "Hey, wait a minute! You're not the only America, right? We're part of America also." Yeah. But then I want to kind of go back to another thing that you said, and I definitely recognize this, and that was that Baja. We kind of consider ourselves a separate country sometimes. So tell me a little bit about that, the connection to the American continent, number one, but then. I also I read or heard a story somewhere that the Mexican federal government really didn't consider. Well, that's where the frontera component of Baja came from. But I read somewhere that the Mexican government didn't even start trying to collect income tax from the states of Baja until like the 1970s or something. They just kind of considered it, like we call it, the Wild West, and nothing of value there. Is that accurate?
Not too far. You're not too far from it. I'm not a huge student of the history side of it, because I've been more on this side than that side. But yes, Okay, and it's kind of a no man's land because you get to the mainland and the folks down in the mainland and especially down Mexico City side, and they don't know what to make of Baja sometimes. At least back in those days, they didn't. Okay, they just kind of turned the other way. It was all about the mainland. And now you start to see the development, and you see both sides, of the Frontera region, and it's become a mirror. The markets are starting to mirror each other and growing at such a rapid pace on the southern side of the border to emulate and replicate what's on the north side.
Yeah.
I've made a career in the tire business, 20 some years. And that used to be a thing early on about, hey, what can we do? How can we get involved? And how can we start to develop what we're seeing, especially in Baja? And I mean, you and I both are connected to the BF Goodrich programs. And, that was the genesis of the relationship with Terza, Rodrigo Valle's business that, Terza now, controls, I think, for BF Goodrich and Michelin, the entire Baja Peninsula with the best distribution network out there. I mean, you see them everywhere. And that was a relationship that was started through off-road racing and just gaining knowledge about, hey, what fitments are needed, what's happening down there, what are you seeing? Which he was quite savvy and very ingrained to get that information out of the organization to help him prop up his business. And the early findings were that, okay, they're in delay, not as much delay as, let's say, Europe is to the Americas in terms of proliferation of sizing. And then as time went on and we developed a deeper and deeper relationship, we saw that margin closing really, really quickly. And, look where we are today. You get down there and Mercedes-Benz dealerships, BMW dealerships. I mean, it's incredible how quickly that mirror effect is taking place.
Sure. That proliferation of the mirroring, as you're saying, is evident almost all the way down the peninsula. Really, I can remember when we first moved there in 2000.
Yep.
Southern Baja, Los Cabos region.
Yep.
We shopped for our produce in one small little market. We shopped for our dry goods in another small little market. We went to I can't remember the name of the store, but there was one store that was known for the imported U.S. goods.
Yeah.
And man, today you got the Costco's, the Walmarts, the Sam's Clubs.
Sure.
I mean, it is, and again, that there's the good and the bad with that. I mean, there's something to be said for affordable and a variety of goods for the local people, for sure.
Yeah.
So, but
and you've got to consider too now at this point, tourism, right? One of the largest sources of revenue for the peninsula. Okay. There's so many foreign folks coming down and enjoying the country. They enjoy some familiarity with things that they're familiar with, right?
Sure. Yeah.
The goods, the products. I mean, they all want it authentic too, right? But there's some comfort zone attached with, oh my God, I'm going to go here because I know they've got this product, right? Or they use this and they get it from there, whatever. That was really, really important some years ago. It's become less so, but people, I mean, I see it in our business all day long. Okay. We've got a great business going there. The restaurant does really well. So does the bar. A lot of the product we use. Okay. Some of, we try to source a lot of local stuff, but a lot of it comes from this side. And a lot of it comes out of Costco and Mexicali, which is sourcing the same products. People like that. They're following that. So interesting, the dynamic,
Definitely interesting. So I know that you guys have Pete's Camp.
Yes.
And I believe through conversations we've had that you are also involved in land down by Punta Bafeo. Is that right?
On the Ensenada side?
Oh, okay. I thought you had property down Punta Bafeo on the Cia Cortez side.
Yes. No. Yes. We have some property down south. My dad's got a few little things in his pocket here and there, and yeah, there's some property down south.
I brought that up just because I think that as the highway there continues to be repaired right now, but eventually completed to one. And I always forget it's Highway 3, right? Not 5.
Once it's 5 down to San Felipe,
Uh-huh.
and then I'm not sure how the numbering changes at that point.
Okay. All right. Um, Anyways, my point is that I think that there could very well be listeners that are interested in buying land and creating a retirement place for them. And we've watched what's happened in the El Dorado region.
Mm-hmm.
Are we seeing people buying land for retirement homes down south of, call it, Portocitos area, or you think we're still a ways off for that?
Yeah, again, I think it depends on who's holding the project and who's developing the project.
Sure.
Okay. We've all heard the horror stories, right?
Yep.
So, the folks that are interested in going south, the only thing I can tell you, my best advice is make sure you know who you're dealing with, okay? And make sure that you do your due diligence with the folks that are in the know in that particular area, okay? There's a lot of he said, she said, but the folks that have been there rooted for time, they know the real story.
Yeah.
Okay.
So title insurance, I know that at least in Southern Baja, their U.S. title insurance companies do business down there.
Mm-hmm.
There are title insurance opportunities for property in the San Felipe and southern
Yes.
San Felipe regions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to who you're dealing with and how they planned and how they developed their project.
Yeah.
Okay. And if they've done it the correct way, then you don't have things to worry about.
And not to dwell on this, and I think that it's important to share this with people. What I understand about some of the title problems that have taken place in the past, and some of them have been highly publicized, like the Southern Ensenada years ago,
Yep.
had to do with a lack of understanding on the foreigners' side as to whether or not they really could or could not own the land that they had built a home on. And a lot of that had to do with the ejido component of it. And
Yes.
I don't believe I've ever gone into explaining what an ejido is on this podcast, and I'm going to assume that you could probably do a better job of it than I can. Can I ask you to just kind of give us the 20,000-foot view of what an ejido is and how that comes into play when we're talking about trying to buy land?
Yeah, the guy you really want on here to talk about that is my father, because he knows all the ins and outs of it, and a bona fide ejidatario. But at the end of the day, I can give you the 100,000-foot view. Okay,
Sure.
Communal landholding arrangement. Okay, you must be a citizen of Mexico, obviously. You must have some local connection to be in the ejido. Okay, that's where it gets fuzzy for me as to who has the rights.
Sure.
Okay. But at the end of the day, that's plain and simple what it is. All right. And among that communal landholding, they all have to agree, okay, in majority as to what they do with the individual pieces of land. Everybody has their own share or their own plots, okay, depending on how many people and how much land they're talking about. And then they decide as a whole whether they can each, transact their individual portions, if they can or not, or they have to move in, all in a unified direction. So that's a real high altitude perspective.
Somebody put it in layman's terms for me one time, and it was something along these lines. So I'm interested to hear if you would agree or disagree with me. And it was Mexican government was wanting to settle the Baja Peninsula, so they made these communal land arrangements and granted large parcels of land to, for lack of better words, an extended family. And each member got a portion of the land to do with as they please, but no one actually owned it. They owned it all together. So the farmers ended up in the valleys, the hunters ended up in the mountains, and the fishermen ended up on the beaches. And this was hundreds of years ago. And as time passed and tourism started and foreigners started hanging out along the coastlines, they ultimately, they'd come and camp and then would build a shade structure that would then end up, they'd leave